There's been a misunderstanding communication between the industry and education for decades, in that industry will say that colleges are delivering curriculum, or a curriculum that's dated. The skills, techniques that students are learning are not required in industry, and there are too many skills that are not covered, and there's not enough consideration around the ingredients, the commodities, where they come from, seasonality, sustainability, but also things like understanding business practices, understanding the core fundamentals of survival in the industry for businesses. So I think there's a real opportunity for industry and education to form a much closer partnership to bridge this skills gap that's currently out there. I think it's perfectly positioned to form that relationship. It's already happening, but to form those relationships between industry and the educators. On a weekly basis, chefs and front of house personnel are going into colleges and delivering contemporary presentations and demonstrations to the students around what's happening in their businesses. But I also think it's important for the industry experts to understand the curriculum and the content of the curriculum that the educators have to get through. Without getting this through, they won't be able to succeed in their examinations and their assessments. So I think it's looking at the content of the curriculum and then giving that to industry and saying, how would you cover this part of the curriculum from an industry perspective? So it could be with fish dishes or poultry dishes, or in the patisserie kitchens. So that's really my plan, is to grab probably the three main qualifications that are being utilised and deployed throughout the country, and then taking that to the industry and saying, right guys, you've complained and said that this isn't what's happening in colleges isn't fit for purpose. You take this curriculum, just these headline content, and how would you deliver it? How would you put these dishes together? And I want to map that together and then go back into the colleges with the chefs, and really form this alliance and understanding. MVQs are a very dated qualification. They should have gone years ago, but they've managed to survive, probably because of the plethora of other qualifications and sort of misunderstandings. They were designed to be delivered in the industry, and with a lot of flexibility that different parts of industry could utilise certain modules that fitted their business. They weren't really designed for delivery within colleges. Colleges have got away with it because they've got realistic working environments, so they can say that this is their restaurants, their college restaurants provide that resource for that type of learning. But realistically, they're not truly fit for purpose, and there's too much option and too much flexibility in the qualifications, in terms of it's possible for a student to get an MVQ qualification without doing the veg unit or the fish unit or the sauce unit. So how could a student be qualified and go into industry and they've never worked with fish, for example, or they haven't done certain bits of patisserie? So they're at fault in a way, but I think more widely the government and the changes in government and the constant change to qualifications hasn't helped either, and the industry don't really understand, I wouldn't say, qualifications and their true content. Well, an ideal student needs to have a real fundamental platform of skills and attitudes and knowledge. Too often there's a focus on the niceties of cookery, in terms of what hits the plate and how aesthetically pleasing it is to the eye. But it's quite superficial, and there needs to be much more focus on sound technique, understanding, flavour profiles, seasoning, learning about commodities, and those type of things. And too often these basic fundamentals are missed, and it's then clearly evident when somebody goes into a kitchen, they're asked to do something relatively straightforward that most people would think would be covered, and can fall down. So it's really essential, in my opinion, to get those fundamental skills, techniques, but also that behaviour, understanding of the industry, so that students can go in with the right attitude, the right sort of perception of what's about to, how their career is going to unfold, and use that platform, that fundamental platform, to build their career from. There's obviously at this present time a huge shortage of personnel in the industry, front and back of house. The combination of Brexit with the pandemic has had a catastrophic effect on the industry, whether it's European people returning home and not coming back, or people that were working in the industry that maybe lost their jobs or were furloughed and looked for other careers and have changed. So there is a real opportunity for the industry to get this right. And to get this right, there needs to be joined up thinking between education and industry, because both parties have to take responsibility and they have to work together. If they don't work together, it's going to fall apart. So there has to be a recognition that a young person is going to need some support. They can't just hit a kitchen, be bombarded and shouted and screamed at, and this is how it was back in the day, because the world has changed. That won't be accepted very often in today's world. But with that right support and with the right training, there is a fantastic opportunity to take what's happened over the last 2 years and really draw a line under it and think, well, we need to rebuild this industry from scratch in terms of how we're going to fill the personnel for the future of front and back of house operations. I'd say the three main qualification structures that are used in the UK would be the City and Guilds technical qualifications, which were designed with the T levels in mind. T levels are on the horizon from the government across a variety of industries, and will be a real challenge to colleges in terms of their delivery. Then there's the MVQs, which are still sort of hanging on. And then there are the vocationally relevant qualifications, the VRQs, which are also out there. They're all slightly different in terms of the way that they're assessed. Some have examinations and practical tests. MVQs are competence-based. So, for example, I make a soup. It's been assessed as successful, it gets signed off, and then the journey continues until you finish that unit, the minimum amount of units, and you get your qualification. Whereas some of the others will have, official end of year practical tests that may be up to 5 hours or so, depending on the level, where the students will have to do a sort of a cross section of the curriculum in terms of maybe some fish, some meat, some sauce, vegetarian dishes, a few desserts, baked products, that sort of thing, and also a knowledge test. So there's quite a difference between those assessment methods, because I think it's probably advantageous to the student who just has to do a competency-based thing, because if they get it wrong, they can revisit it the next day or the next week, get it right, it's signed off. If you've got a 5-hour practical test and you fail it, you fail it. If you sit a 2-hour written exam, you fail it, you fail it. You might get one more shot, but if you don't get through that, then you fail your qualification. So although the levels might be the same, level 2, level 3, etc., I think the assessment methods and the content of the qualifications isn't on a level playing field. And colleges, because of the pressures of Ofsted and success and retention and achievement, they will normally go for the one that is the least painful in terms of maximising success, retention, achievement. So that's quite often why qualifications such as the MVQ are still being utilised quite widely throughout the I'm in favour of a qualification that actually tests the skills and the knowledge. I understand that there is a risk to that in terms of if somebody fails an exam, they have to resit it. But I think if you're going to act and work as a chef, for example, you have to consider more than one thing at a time. It's very, very rare that you would go into a kitchen and your job for the day would be to make a soup or to make a dish. You would normally have to have your mind on a variety of different dishes. So I think in terms of testing the way that somebody can work in a kitchen and their kitchen organisation and structure and planning, then something that has a tested element that will put that into practice is a stronger option for me. Well, my intention through the academies is to get a team of highly respected, technically gifted chefs and front of house staff as well, to have a look at the qualifications, and they'll just be headline topics, and it could be filleting, poaching, steaming, etc., etc. These are the headline topics from the qualification, and just say, okay, let's put a dish together. Let's put some products together that will cover these basic skills, but in a contemporary way that you would do this in industry. And then we can go to the colleges and say, this has been thought through, it's been tested, we've got to obviously keep finance in mind as well, because we can't obviously spread the use of very expensive commodities, because there'll be budgets that we have to work to, etc. So what's happening so far is the chefs that I've mentioned these ideas to have thought it's a great idea. They really want to get involved. They want to be involved in that, so they can say they have participated and they have the opportunity to share their voice in terms of what is happening within the curriculum, rather than receiving things and saying, well, you've been making chicken chasseur and strawberry gâteau and trifle. It's not the sort of stuff that we're doing these days. Although it's met the requirements of your curriculum, it's not really that helpful in terms of what we're going to be asking you to do when you come and work in our kitchens. Birds are birds. They're just different sort of sizes and structures, and they are commonly used. Chicken is a very versatile and very commonly used commodity within the industry, but it's what you do with it. So I would, we've done this with Hayden Grows, for example, during the summer. I said to Hayden, okay, here's chicken. Here's the students have to breadcrumb this chicken. They have to pan it, they have to break it down, etc., etc. How would you produce a dish or garnishes to a dish that would utilise these skills but not turn it into a classic sort of chicken Kiev or a chicken cut for sauté or something like that? And that's exactly what we did. So we utilised the products, we utilised the skills and techniques, and brought that together to show how those things could be adapted into a more contemporary practice. We also have to remember that everything seems to go round in a trend as well. So even though I've just mentioned chicken Kiev, if you look at the menu at the Hand and Flowers, Tom Kerridge has got a chicken Kiev on, and he has the chicken Kiev in other restaurants as well. So it can be maligned in one case, but also reinvigorated and reinvented in another. So we have to be mindful that nothing truly goes out of fashion. It's just a case of how those skills can be filtered into the types of dishes that will be used in industry. So for example, poaching fish, quite often the bones from the fish will be turned into a stock, the stock will be turned into a velouté. Veloutés, the word might be used in industry, but the technique of a classical roux-based velouté is probably not very often used, in higher end cuisine at least. So it's that understanding that the basis of classical French cuisine has changed, and when new types of cuisine have come in from Nouvelle cuisine beyond, and we're talking back to the 70s, where things became a lot lighter and there was a lot more freedom to chefs, whereas if you put a Tornado Rossini on a menu, whether it is in Bournemouth or London or Newcastle or Glasgow, the components of the dish and the way that dish was prepared and presented should be exactly the same. However, when chefs started to get more freedom and a bit more poetic license, then they would start to adapt these dishes away from the heaviness of some of the traditional sauces from French classical cuisine. And I think, in one sense, what's happened with qualifications is that they need something to tie themselves to, and the simplest thing is to tie yourself to something that has a lot of rules. And French classical cuisine has a lot of rules. This is how it has to be done, whereas contemporary cuisine doesn't really have those rules. You can write a menu, you can describe it however you want, and nobody's really going to criticise that, because the creativity is with the chef, and how they describe that dish is down to them. So there is this transition, I feel, between what's happening classically and what's happening to qualifications and what's happening in industry, and that has widened, and we need to get it back together. I think with the fundamentals, with going back to those fundamentals, if a student can fillet a fish cleanly and can pin bone it and can skin it if necessary, or score it or whatever, that is a fundamental skill that can be applied to French cuisine, Spanish cuisine, Oriental cuisine. Then you've got the excitement of learning from different cultures in terms of, you know, how they then take those next steps going forward. So I think there's another opportunity there for the colleges and industry to understand that, yeah, it doesn't just have to come from the repertoire in terms of this dish must be completed in this way. It can be utilising those skills of filleting, etc. If we're going to steam a fish, why don't we steam a fish in an Oriental style? You know, there's similarities between things like en papillote and the way that certain Chinese dishes might be steamed, etc. So I think it's really exciting, but with those, you know, really grassroots skills and that passion and you know, those technical skills that you can put together, then the world's in the hands of those students. You know, the world's their oyster in terms of what type of cuisine they want to go into. And I think you'll find on most menus there'll be some fusion and some ideas and some commodities and flavours and skills that chefs have picked up from working with a variety of skills from different types of cuisine, that they round their own knowledge, and then they have that freedom of expression that they can then put into their own type of cooking. As well as students just basically following a recipe, for example, they've got to understand what's happening. And then there's been so much innovation from chefs over the last 20 years more, that really are utilising these bases, but in a really exciting and innovative way. So there's nothing wrong. Again, with a strawberry or raspberry tart, beautiful. It's the creme diplomat in the middle, or a creme chantilly or whatever. But it's about understanding how these base products are made, but then how they can be taken forward into different ways that will meet what's happening in the industry. Because some of the products that students are learning at college are perhaps not the right ones in terms of what they'll be doing when they hit a pastry kitchen in the